Reverse by Black K. Cat. Chapter 77. Leal. Sit Leothrim, Kisame says, and the usual lightness is gone from his tone as he wheels on Kakashi as hard. You have his other Tarigan, don't you? Wherever he went, send me there! Kakashi finally tears his gaze away from the spot where Obito disappeared, and Kurama can't even begin to read the expression on his face right now. I can't, he says carefully, precisely. Mine is a transplant. I don't have the chakra to even begin to know what he did, let alone create it and throw you across dimensions. Not that it matters, Kurama puts in, crossing his arms over his chest and meeting the glare that Kisame turns on him without flinching. That bastard doesn't have the chakra either. With how his Sharingan was bleeding, he had a few minutes left at most before it overloaded. Hopefully it does, Kurama thinks, a touch grimly. He can remember all too clearly how Zetsu used Obito's Rinnegan against his will to resurrect Madara in the Fourth War, and he could conceivably do the same thing here, using Kamui to jump back across dimensions. If Obito doesn't have any chakra left, that means Zetsu's chances of managing it are slim, but that's not a chance Kurama wants to take. He's staying right here until long enough has passed that it's not a concern. Kisame growls, a deep sound that rumbles up through him like thunder, and grabs Kurama by the collar of his shirt. No! He says, the denial as sharp as the crack of a whip. He drags Kurama forward a step up on his toes like he's going to shake him, and Kurama might indulge anyone else in any other circumstances, but not Kisame. Not over Obito. He grabs Kisame's wrist, pries Kisame's fingers loose from the cloth, and knocks his hand away. Fuck off! He was trying to turn the world into a giant house of mirrors. The sound Kisame makes is halfway to a laugh, halfway back from a snarl. You really think he would have sacrificed himself like that if he still felt that way? The swordsman asks, and Kurama would almost feel better if it was a demand. If it was just Kisame losing control. But this is just sad. Resigned. He chuckles a little, no humor in the sound, and turns away to hide his face. He said, that's on me. He took the blame for his part, and this is how he's paying. Obito knew what he did. His goals changed when he reclaimed his name. You don't get to put everything on him. Only most of it, Kurama retorts, in no mood to be corrected, but, well, once is a coincidence, but maybe 2 times is the start of a pattern. Obito betrayed Madara and Zetsu again, even without Naruto's influence in this timeline, and maybe that counts for something. Something tiny and almost insignificant, given everything he's done, but still there. No matter how much Kurama wants to deny it. It's enough for Kurama to go out of his way to save the bastard, though, especially so soon after his last encounter with the Sharingan. Kisame doesn't answer, so Kurama turns away, moves to where Kakashi is still staring, frozen, at the point where Obito vanished. He isn't certain whether the contact will be welcome, but Kurama still gives in to the urge, reaches out anyway to curl his fingers around Kakashi's elbow. Kakashi startles a little at the touch, jerking around, but when he sees Kurama standing there, he manages a smile. Small and crooked, and just enough to touch his eyes. Hey, Kurama says gently, and the adrenaline from the fight is still high, too much to be cut off by something as simple as Zetsu vanishing, but he keeps his voice soft regardless. You okay? Kakashi pauses, gaze drifting back to the other column, and then shuddering. He smiles, reaching up to tip his Hitayate back down, and says, I would have killed him if we weren't fighting someone else. Or at least I would have tried to. He would have deserved it, Kurama tells him, and Kakashi hums, but not like he believes the words. You knew he was capable of changing sides. Kakashi still isn't looking at him. This happened before, didn't it? Kurama shrugs. You and Minato and Naruto talked him around eventually. But then Zetsu hijacked his body and everything went to hell anyway. Another pause, but this time Kakashi looks back at Kurama, meets his eyes, and doesn't try to hide the wryness there. I'm not sure whether that makes it better or worse. Kurama could tell him that the first time around Obito died taking a blow for Kakashi, but he doesn't. Kakashi doesn't need to hear that right on the heels of Obito's second sacrifice. Besides, the outcome that time was probably just about the best for Obito. He died without having to face the nation's justice, and while it was a noble gesture to die for his old teammate, Kurama had always sort of wondered if it was deliberate. After all, Obito should have been able to warp both of Kaguya's rods out of the way. That was just about the least Kamui was capable of. That he hadn't, that he then left Kakashi his eyes to finish the fight and disappeared, has always struck Kurama as a man finally choosing his own fate rather than one pushed on him. And while Kurama can respect that, he's not exactly feeling inclined towards kindness where Obito is concerned either. The bastard is a pain in the butt on a good day. It happened, he says instead. Now we need to stick around until we're sure Zetsu's gone for good. If he steals Obito's body and teleports back, he'll have to pass through this place. Kakashi takes a glance around the emptiness of the Kamui dimension, then nods. The more chakra I can gather to get us back, the shorter a stretch I'll be unconscious afterwards, he says, almost cheerful. So I don't mind waiting a bit. Right, because this isn't the Kakashi who'd mastered the Mingyanko. This Kakashi can hardly use it at all. Kurama makes a mental note to bully him into training once Zetsu's definitely dead and rolls his eyes at the idiot. Don't sound so happy about it, bastard. Unconsciousness is bad if you haven't figured it out by now. Really? Kakashi feigns complete surprise. Ma, suddenly the way all the doctors yell at me makes more sense. What the heck is Kurama supposed to do with a man like this, honestly? Whatever expression Kurama is wearing must be particularly amusing because Kakashi chuckles. He reaches out, gently tugs Kurama into his arms and wraps him up in a loose hug, burying his nose in Kurama's hair with a sigh. Through the mask, Kurama can feel lips against his temple, breath against his ear. It's not objectionable. Not objectionable in the least, really, and Kurama leans into the warmth, the sturdiness of him. One hand finds Kakashi's hip claws just barely denting the fabric there, and he breathes out slow and careful. There's still a faint flicker of trepidation buried deep inside of him that every time he blinks he'll open his eyes to a red-washed world. But with Kakashi so close, something he'd never ever thought to want, it's an easier fear to dismiss. I'm tired, he says too quietly for Kisame to hear even in the echoing darkness, and it's only when the words have passed his lips that he realizes how true they are. He's used more chakra today than he has in a very long time between facing off against Obito and Kisame, changing forms, and fighting Zetsu. Seeing his Naruto, even just a chakra impression of him, lends its own emotional weariness, and so does the Sharingan. So does all of this, honestly. Kurama had thought they were done with this changing sides crap in the Fourth War, and he's not a fan of it reappearing now. Though it's probably better objectively than having to fight Kisame, Obito, and Zetsu to a halt on their own. A gloved hand hugs the mask down to Kakashi's chin, and he presses a kiss against Kurama's hair. A bed sounds good right about now, he agrees, innocent enough that it's absolutely meant as something dirty, and Kurama snorts and kicks him in the ankle. Bastard, he mutters, and means it. But maybe not as much as it could. There's a long pause, though Kakashi doesn't let go, and Kurama doesn't make him, just stays pressed against Kakashi with their hands on each other. Then, on a breath that feels like trepidation, Kakashi asks almost inaudibly, "What now?" Kurama closes his eyes, not entirely sure himself. If Obito's plan works, if Zetsu is gone, that's it. He succeeded. He's won! What Naruto sent him back to do, he's finally managed it. He remembers what Naruto told him in that red-washed world, moments before the Sharingan's hole broke and the color flooded back. Kurama, be happy, no matter what, okay? And maybe it isn't a goal he's ever had before. Maybe it's not as clear-cut and obvious as keeping Kaguya from coming back. But it's something he's willing to put his effort into. Something he's willing to live for, to focus on. Happiness when for so long he's just been. But now with Naruto and Gaara and Fu and Yugito, with Kakashi and Karin and the older Jinchuriki, and even Kushina, well, maybe that's what he'll try for if this is really the end of his quest. He says, muffled where his forehead is pressed to Kakashi's shoulder, want ramen. I'm starving. There's a moment of startled silence, and then Kakashi laughs. It's soft and warm and genuine, and Kurama can feel it shaking through him, bone deep and sweet. Naruto and Kushina will approve, he says, and Kurama can feel the smile against his cheek. A little regretfully, he untangles himself from Kakashi, pulling back, and can't help but snort at Kakashi's sound of protest. Hands to yourself, he says, though he doesn't quite mean it. If Zetsu comes bursting back in here, I don't want to end up tripping over your lazy butt. So cruel, Kakashi laments again, but he doesn't let go completely, letting his hand slide down Kurama's arm until he can tangle their fingers and squeeze gently. I hope you know I'm still trying to recover from the trauma of you attempting to eat me. I'll make it up to you later, Kurama promises dryly, glancing over at where Kisame is standing, back turned to them, Samahata slung over his shoulder. Honestly, Kurama doesn't give a crap about the swordsman either way. He used to be an enemy, now he's mostly not, and if he goes back to being one, Kurama's only feelings will be concerned over how to defeat him without Guy around. But loss is a familiar feeling, and as much as he'd rather not, he can understand that. Kiri's a different place now, he tells the swordsman. It means you could go back if you wanted. The rumble of Kisame's laugh is viciously amused. I'm sure it is, he says, still not looking back. But nowhere in the world is as different as I want it to be. Not yet. Wherever I end up with the shinobi world as it is, there's always the chance they'll ask me to kill comrades. To lie. I won't do that again. It's true. And Kurama can't argue. His Naruto was trying to better things, working towards change and an end of conflicts between the hidden villages, at the very least. But Kaguya had risen again before he could manage it. It was a promise he had made as a genin, spoken before Zabuza and Haku's graves, and he never forgot it, even in the very darkest moments. That was a world Kisame would have wanted to see, Kurama thinks. This time around it might not happen, and Kurama knows it's selfish, but he honestly doesn't care. This Naruto was already happier than the one Kurama knew before, and he wouldn't change that for anything. If that keeps the world a little darker, a little harsher, well, Kurama's not going to complain. You're just going to keep being a missing nin? Kakashi asks, and the tone is mild, but the words are cool. A mercenary. Kisame chuckles. I've killed just as many people as Obito, you know, he tells Kakashi lightly, turning, and his sharpened teeth are an unnerving flash of white in the gloom. Kono's yellow flash probably killed more. I bet your red hot habaneros count is up there too. We all dress it up as following a higher order, so what makes us the criminals and you the good guys? When Kakashi doesn't answer, he chuckles again, though his eyes are large. Yeah, exactly. Just the fact that you won. We were misled and lied to, and we own the deaths and pain we caused because they're our fault. But this whole world's filthy. I'm not signing up to stain myself with more filth, even if you think saying I'm fighting for something you approve of will make my hands cleaner. Kakashi is stiff at Kurama's side, but Kurama tugs at his hand a bit, makes him glance over. His tension slides down a notch. That's your choice, he says carelessly. You come in or staying when we go back to Konoha. There's a long minute of silence as Kisame clearly weighs his options. You don't have enough chakra to come back for me, he says finally, more statement than question, but Kakashi tips his head in confirmation regardless. Kisame's mouth pulls tight when he sees it, and he reaches up to rub at the back of his neck, ducking his head to hide the expression on his face. Leave me here then. You worried about Zetsu coming back? I'll make sure he doesn't. Kakashi glances at Kurama, one brow lifting, and Kurama looks back with a frown. That's not something he'd have thought Kisame would pick. And while it's a solid way to make sure Zetsu doesn't pull anything, it's also pretty much a death sentence phrased like that. I can come back for you in... Kakashi starts. No! Kisame interrupts, and he keeps his face turned away, but the flicker of his chakra is resigned and resolved in equal measure. They're not going to be able to change his mind. You don't have to do that. If nothing happens, well, at least Samahata won't end up with a second-rate swordsman. She deserves better than that. He pats his sword's hilt, and his laugh almost manages to be convincing. You're not going to end up jumping on board with Zetsu, right? Kurama asks, watching the man closely. He doesn't think so, but the flare of Kisame's chakra is almost as heavy as a Bijuu's, dark with fury and edged with a hatred that Kurama is willing to bet is directed straight at Zetsu. No! Kasame growls. Not in this lifetime or any other. Traitors all deserve what I get. Fair enough, Kurama decides, and there's very little chance Kasame could fake that kind of emotion. He nods, ignoring Kakashi's startled glance, and steps back. There's no way to let us know if you change your mind, he warns. Kasame's smile is wry, even if it's edged with teeth. I won't. Kurama nods, pulling Kakashi along with him as he retreats towards the edge of the column. All right, he says, as much of a goodbye as he's willing to offer, and watches as Kasame turns away again, putting his back to them before he sinks down to sit cross-legged Samahara at his side. And maybe it's the most fitting end for him when he was so loyal to Obito in life. He died for him the first time around, and now he's choosing to do the same again. Apparently, even all of Kurama's changes so far can't erase some parallels. He's kind of getting sick of it. Kurama closes his fingers a little more tightly around Kakashi's, takes a breath, and lets his chakra start to bleed into the air into Kakashi's veins. Sakura used this technique often enough in that ruined future to keep Sasuke and Naruto going when they hit the edges of even their reserves. Simple enough to call it up after seeing it so many times, and Kurama might be tired, but his reserves are still 10 times greater than Kakashi's. A deliberate look is flashed his way, but Kakashi doesn't say anything, doesn't point out that he could have helped Obito survive this way. He just grips Kurama's hand in return, reaches up to pull his Hitayate straight, and lets his chakra gather. His Sharingan spins lazily, and around them the air warps, the world twists. Their feet hit stone, and Kakashi staggers, knees buckling. Kurama catches him on instinct, but he's off balance, not quite ready, and Kakashi's weight pulls him down. They land hard on the top of the wall, Kurama on his knees, with Kakashi half collapsed over his shoulders, skin suddenly clammy and sheened with sweat, and Kurama sighs as the ripples in space fade. The idiot, he mutters grumpily, pressing his nose against Kakashi's jaw. One breath, and he makes a face, though he still doesn't move. And you reek. You need a bath, dog boy. Kakashi chuckles, groping at his Itayate for a moment, but not quite managing to get a grip on it. Kurama does it for him, tilting it back down to cover the transplanted eye, and Kakashi slumps as the drain to his chakra immediately eases. He's not quite unconscious, but is close. Want to share? He asks, giving Kurama a tearfully lecherous smile that would be a lot more flattering if his eye wasn't drooping. I believe you promised to make things up to me? Kurama punches him lightly in the ribs. Perverted bastard. Try that again when you're not swooning in my arms. He staggers upright, hauling Kakashi up with him, and grabs him around the waist when he nearly faceplants in the stone again. Ugh! Kakashi mutters, gripping Kurama's arm. Human limits! I thought those were for other people. With a roll of his eyes, Kurama steadies them, then takes a testing step. Kakashi follows him gamely, if with less grace than normal, so he keeps moving. Today is just a learning experience all around, isn't it? Kakashi-senpai! The cry makes Kurama and Kakashi both glance up to see Tenzo hopping across the tangled vines and roots below. Chisui behind him and moving a bit more slowly. One long leap and Tenzo lands right in front of them, hovering like he doesn't know whether to take Kakashi's other arm. Senpai, you okay? Yo! Kakashi gives him a lazy salute and a smile that crinkles his visible eye, though his gaze flickers over first Tenzo, then Shisui as the Uchiha joins them. I'm alright, just tired. You too? Shisui needs a medic. Tenzo reports promptly and ignores the way Shisui squawks in offense. I have a minor concussion, but I'm fine. Having a concussion means you're not fine, Kakashi says with the air of someone repeating an oft-made point. Kurama gives him a disbelieving look because hello hypocrisy, but Kakashi ignores him regally. To the hospital, both of you! Yes, sir, they chorus, and there's a brief scuffle as they decide who's going to lean on who. Really? Kurama mutters and then growls. It carries through the air with a heavy rumble, and Chisui squeaks and practically trips over himself, scrambling away. Tenzo looks between him and Kurama, faintly mystified, but before he can ask, Kurama says pointedly, Go! Chisui blinks at him for 1 second before his eyes widen, all of the color draining from his face. You! He squawks. You threatened to eat me! Oh god, that was... You! He catches the darkening of Kurama's expression, just daring him to say it, and almost swallows his tongue as he flails his unbroken hand. You... that... threat! Not a threat, Kurama tells him, unimpressed, and curls lip to bare his teeth. A promise. Now get! Shisui goes ghost pale for a beat before every inch of visible skin suffuses with crimson, and he groans long and loud and turns to bury his face in Tenzo's chest. No! He says plaintively. I know now you don't get to steal me hot! That is not okay! Kurama rolls his eyes, unamused. Getting! Shisui squeaks, grabs Tenzo, and vanishes in a whirl of leaves. He has a point, you know, Kakashi says mildly, and when Kurama glares at him, he blinks innocently. You are very hot. I'm glad you think so, Kurama says dryly, and pulls him up a little straighter. But I'm still not sharing a shower with you. Kakashi pouts. Honestly, Kurama has no idea why he likes this man. With a growl, he grabs Kakashi by the collar and backs him up against the wash tower, then hauls him into another kiss. It's not sweet or gentle, but full of teeth. He scrapes Kakashi's lip, bites at his mouth until he opens, then pushes him, kissing him hard as he fists a hand in silver air. Kakashi makes a sound of surprise that turns into a groan, gets a hand on Kurama's hip, and drags him up with a leg between his thighs. It's startling enough to make Kurama gasp, jolting in Kakashi's grip, and in an instant Kakashi has twisted and flipped them, pushing Kurama up against the stone as they slide downward. Kurama isn't entirely certain if Kakashi's legs can hold him up or if he just wants them on the ground, but either way he lets it happen, keeps kissing Kakashi, desperate and furious, and Kakashi answers it, meets him halfway. So hot! Kakashi breathes against his mouth and presses back in, gets one of Kurama's lips between sharp teeth. Even as his hands slip under Kurama's tattered shirt, he drags his fingers over skin and pushes up with his knee, and Kurama gasps and arches into the touch. The sound Kakashi makes in response is low and hungry, and he kisses Kurama again, all teeth and tongue and intent. They part, and Kurama can't help but laugh, roughly curling his fingers and gently scraping his claws over Kakashi's scalp just for the full body shiver it gets him. You're not so bad yourself, he answers, and Kakashi chuckles against his throat, pressing a kiss beneath his chin and then letting his mouth slide down. He pauses, setting his teeth to the skin, and makes a noise that's halfway through a question. Kurama's been in the passenger seat for this way too many times, because Sasuke and Naruto were both possessive. It shouldn't even be hot anymore, because watching two teenagers suck on each other's necks was anything but attractive. Common sense means nothing at all, though, in the face of Kakashi's hot breath on his skin, the scrape of teeth, the clutch of his hands tight and grounding against Kurama's ribs. Yes, he manages, more breathless than he'd intended to sound, but unable to care about it, and his fingers tighten in Kakashi's hair as Kakashi bites gently at his throat, laughs at the cut skin as he runs his fingers up Kurama's chest. His skin shivers to Kurama with each touch, and he groans, free hand finding the back of Kakashi's flak jacket. He pulls once, hard, and Kakashi breaks away, surging up to kiss him again, messy and perfect. If you could keep that from healing, he says between slanting kisses, I'd be much obliged. Kurama laughs, curls a leg over his hip, and drags him closer until their chests are pressed together. Screw that. You'll just have to give me another one. The sound Kakashi makes is dark and interested, and he crushes their mouths together, tasting, pressing up and in, and overbalances, almost face-planting in the wall behind Kurama's shoulder. There's a moment of absolute silence before Kakashi groans, and it's definitely not sexy this time. He slumps down, and Kurama unwinds himself enough for Kakashi to drop his head onto Kurama's shoulder with a sound of despair. Poor you, Kurama says, and doesn't even try to keep the amusement out of his voice. The mind is willing, but the body is suffering from borderline chakra exhaustion. Huh. Kakashi bats at him ineffectually. I can't tell if my head is spinning from kissing you or because I'm about to pass out, he complains. The latter, Kurama decides, and nudges Kakashi back so he can get to his feet. He hauls one long arm over his shoulder and pulls Kakashi up as well, then calls, Hey Fuji, you still around? From the tangle of greenery below, there's a scuffle, and an instant later a white shape is bounding up the broken stone and skidding to a halt in front of them. Kurama-sama, the vixen says brightly. Did you Kurama laughs because they did! Zetsu is gone, trapped in another dimension, and even if he possesses Obito's matter and makes it back before Obito's eyes burn out completely, Kasame is waiting, ready to avenge his partner. They won! And now Kaguya has no way back into this world! It's finished! The last request Naruto made of him has been fulfilled, and there's no way for that dark future to happen again. Yeah, Fuji, he says, and the words crack just a little in his throat. We won. It's over. Fuji gives him a fox grin, all dagger teeth and lolling tongue, and turns sideways so they can slide onto her back. Good for you, Kurama-sama. Did the dog man get hurt again? I take offense to that, Kakashi says mildly, but the effect is spoiled by the fact that he almost slides right over Fuji's back to land in the dirt. Kurama only just catches him in time, sliding off behind him and wrapping an arm around his waist. Yeah, he agrees dryly, ignoring the bout Kakashi aims at him. You did. If you could take us to the hospital, that would be great. Kakashi protests, but Fuji is already moving, leaping forward in a surge of sleek muscle that carries them over the side of the wall and into the streets beyond. It's cold and dim and quiet, empty of any noise beyond Kasame's own breathing. He evens out each breath, makes them deliberate and careful as he lets his mind slip into the half-watchful, half-meditative state that can stand in for sleep in a pinch. It's been a long day, and he's tired, but that master doesn't have the chakra either. With how his Sharingan was bleeding, he had a few minutes left at most before it overloaded, Kurama had said. A few minutes isn't much, and Kasame knows it. Knows the odds, or can guess them. But he still can't bring himself to regret his choice. Kurama and the Kapinan are gone, and he hopes they have a happy life. But for him, this is the best option. Maybe Yagura would have welcomed him back to Kiri, but Kasame has felt the bite of that betrayal once already. He's endured being hated for following orders, endured finding out that killing his comrades was nothing but a falsehood built on a traitor's lies. Obito was the one who shared his vision, who wanted a world where that couldn't happen, where children weren't soldiers too, and the strength of their desire for that made them blind. Zetsu took advantage of them, twisted their goals, and Kasame hates it with a low, burning wrath that settled deep in his bones. They did so many things in pursuit of their goals, and Kasame didn't regret them at the time, but now, the ends no longer justify the means. Kasame is a man used to regrets. He's had so many of them over the course of his life, and when Obito had approached him in Kiri, he had believed they were done with. Too much to hope for, apparently. And what does it say about him? That he still doesn't regret meeting someone like Obito, someone he can give his loyalty to and not have it casually betrayed. Another breath, and he opens his eyes, takes in the dimension created by Obito's Sharingan, and wishes he had moved fast enough, been wary enough to follow Obito when he knocked Zetsu into the portal. He hadn't expected it, hadn't even known it was a possibility, but one look at Obito's face had told him that the other man didn't expect to make it back. Thank you, Kasame, for giving me back my name. There's no reason in the world for Kasame to stay here, except that there's every reason. He has nowhere else to go, and even if he did, well, this isn't such a bad way to die if his hopes come to nothing in the end. Loyalty is built on faith, though, and Kasame's faith is telling him that this isn't the end. A flicker of chakra curls through the air, and Kasame raises his head. Another flicker, just a touch, and he gets to his feet, gathers Samahata up, and wakes her with a thought. Another moment, stretching out into a minute of nothing at all, but Kasame holds steady, watches the empty air of this strange world, and space warps in a tight spiral, and a form falls through, missing the column. Kasame lunges as fast as he's ever moved before and sweeps the battered body out of the air, clutching it to his chest before he lands lightly on the next pillar, careful not to jar his burden. Probably some level of stupid to get so close without checking, but Kasame knows the taste and feel of this chakra, has spent years close to it at this point. He knows who he's holding. Carefully, gently, he crouches down, letting Obito slip from his hold to settle on the ground. Pale fingers clutch his cloak, desperate not to let go, and Kasame doesn't make him. He puts a hand on Obito's cheek, tips his head back enough to see his face, and feels a flicker of concern at the wide, dark streaks of tacky blood down both of his cheeks.
"You okay?"
he asks, brushing at one of them with his thumb. It smears, not yet dry, but at least not fresh, and Kisame's just grateful the bleeding stopped. He's decent at first aid, but something like that would be beyond his skill. Sharingan eyes stay closed, even when Obito raises his head and turns his face towards Kisame. A hand curls around Kisame's wrist, gentle but firm. And Obito rasps,
"I have enough chakra for one more jump." "Where?"
There's an offer implied in the words, one that makes Kisame smile despite himself. He brushes his thumb across Obito's cheek again, less to get rid of the blood and more for the feel of scarred flesh beneath the pad of his finger. And the answer is as easy as breathing.
"Whenever you want to go, boss."
Obito pauses, and Kisame can practically see him gathering his arguments. Another moment, and he says,
"Kisame, I promised Rin. I said I'd try to atone."
Kisame tips one shoulder in a casual shrug, knows Obito can feel it since they're so close.
"Seems like that's the kind of thing I should be doing too. Might be a bit easier if we're together."
For a moment, he thinks Obito is going to keep arguing, has all of his rebuttals lined up and ready, but Obito stops short before the words can escape. He takes a shuddering breath and leans forward, his forehead falling to rest against Kisame's chest, says nothing at all. With a quiet chuckle, Kisame slings Samahada over his back, then wraps an arm around Obito's shoulders, slides the other beneath his knees, and rises to his feet with Obito in his arms.
"Where to?"
he asks, and keeps his voice light. Is far, far easier than it would have been a few minutes ago.
"Wind's country,"
Obito says, and an instant later the heat hits Kisame like a vast hand. His sandals sink into a sand dune as a burning breeze twists past him, carrying a wash of fine dust with it. There's a formation of rocks behind them that cast long shadows against the sand, and Kisame makes for the small opening he can see between the spires of stone. Behind them, the warp vanishes, but Kisame pays it no attention, ducking into the relatively cooler shade of a tiny cave before he sinks into a crouch again.
"Yep,"
he tells Obito, who slides down to sit on the sandy floor, carefully unknotting his fingers from Kisame's cloak. Dark eyes drift open, but they don't focus even when Kisame reaches up to brush his hair back from his face. Just like he thought during the fight, when Obito came back to life and pulled him out of the Mokotan's strangling grasp. It's soft. So much softer than it looks, and Kisame has to smile at the feel of it sliding through his fingers.
"You're blind,"
he says, though it's probably not the sort of thing that needs to be voiced. Obito's smile is small and crooked.
"I couldn't handle the strain of using them like that. It's fine. I'll survive."
"You will."
Kisame agrees, but keeps the "I'll make sure you do" to himself, unsure if it would be welcome. He hesitates and then asks,
"Zezu's gone?"
This time the curl of Obito's smile is almost vicious.
"I left him in a world with extreme gravity and no life anywhere, not even plants. He's going to rot there for the rest of eternity."
Kisame chuckles, entirely pleased with the thought, and settles down next to Obito, leaning back against the wall of the cave.
"Good,"
he says.
"So what next, boss?"
Obito gropes across the floor for a moment before he finds Kisame's knee, follows it up to his hand. He squeezes Kisame's wrist, then presses something into his hand. A kunai, Kisame realizes, glancing at it.
"Please,"
Obito says quietly.
"use my name."
Warmth curls in Kisame's chest, and he catches Obito's fingers in his own, pulling his hand up to press a kiss on the back of it.
"Of course, Obito."
Obito smiles, and this one isn't wry, or sad, or mocking. It's real, warm even if it's small, and he sits back.
"You'll have to help me cut my hair short," he tells Kisame. "We're going to give people here places to grow their own food. I can't have it in my face all the time."
Terraforming, Kisame thinks, almost delighted, and has to laugh. But really, between Obito's Mokotan and his strength with Suiton, they're perfect for the job. And with a bit of economic help, maybe Suno won't be in such a desperate situation. It's not a method of saving the world he would have thought of himself, or ever considered before. But where they are now, it looks like a small gesture that could nevertheless help turn things around. And maybe in the end, that's what the shinobi world needs. Not grand changes, but small ones. Differences that start with the people, where the means are more important than the end goal.
My pleasure.
He says cheerfully and flips the kunai through his fingers as the shadows stretch long outside. It's a good place for a fresh start, he thinks, and smiles.